After seeing China threaten to withhold medical supplies from America in the midst of the coronavirus outbreak, it forced the question of why is American industry in China? Well, Congressman Mark Green of Tennessee, an emergency room doctor, is calling on Congress to cover 100% of the moving cost of American companies to come back to the states using tariff funds. We're also going to talk about President Trump's plan to reopen the economy. Joining me now to talk about all this and more is Representative Mark Green, who represents the 7th Congressional District of the Volunteer State. Congressman, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thanks, Tony, for having me on. I always enjoy it.
Well, Dr. Green, let me ask you this question. You and I early on talked about the threat from the coronavirus and how we needed to protect ourselves personally against this. But now we're a couple months removed from that discussion, and we see how China has responded to this. And you've put out a very public call. In fact, you've introduced legislation to bring American industry back and to pay the price tag for that using the tariffs that are generated in our economic transactions with China. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. The goal with this legislation is to expense those companies, allow them to expense 100% of the move over on their tax returns as a means of helping to get them back. The problem is, particularly as it relates to some of these more sensitive things like PPE and our pharmaceutical supply chain, the precursors for a lot of our medications right now are exclusive to China, and that's unacceptable. We've realized here that these things are really almost a national security issue. So I think what my intention is to motivate those companies to, and of course help them with the expenses to come back to the United States. Our conflict with China as it arises is this effort to become the global hegemon. I think pretty clear the economic conflict has been going on for some time, and they took our manufacturing, so we need to take that back.
Well, in particular, what has made this such an acute problem is that it was some of the materials, medicines that were essential in responding to the coronavirus.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think of the PPE that was donated to them by Italy, and then when Italy needed it, China charged them for it. I mean, that type of mercantilism hasn't been seen in, a really long time, and it's pretty obnoxious. We have companies that are American companies that are manufacturing in China, and they won't let them ship the PPE back to the United States. That's unacceptable, and we have to get those businesses back in America and hopefully some in Tennessee. So,
well, when we look at the relationship that many businesses have had with China, China also has a deplorable human rights record. We've talked about the Uyghur Muslims and how there's now evidence to suggest that they're being used as forced labor in some of these factories that are actually providing goods to some of these American companies. So this is the first time, and I know this has been ongoing discussion, but I think we've reached a critical point that could, I think, from all that I'm hearing and seeing, cause us to totally recalibrate our relationship with China. Do you think we're there?
I do. I think we're there, and I think America is realizing that as China rises, so to speak, and the world sort of shifts from being a unipolar world to a bipolar world, the real critical things are the strength of the American economy, our ability to protect power, and our alliances. And what China has done very aggressively with its Belt and Road Initiative is to go after our alliances. And so I think our reaching out to countries like Vietnam and, of course, having great relationships with our friend Japan and South Korea, all of those things are really important to sort of balancing China as it grows. A lot of things are happening. They're growing their military. They just last year switched from 20,000 Marines to 100,000 Marines in the Chinese, their version of the Marine Corps. There are bases in Djibouti very close to our U.S. military bases there, and our pilots often talk about the Chinese using, pen-light lasers to disrupt our flights. And it's that kind of stuff that it's got to stop. The South China Sea, the islands in the South China Sea, a lot of reasons to be mindful, and I do believe the world is seeing all of these things. The coronavirus has really opened people's minds, and if you look at the media, even the New York Times is publishing stuff about this.
I think you're absolutely right. You're listening to Washington Watch. I'm your host, Tony Perkins. Congressman Mark Green, my guest. I definitely think you're right. I think this has brought it so close to home. I mean, it's literally home, as everyone is sequestered in their homes, that people are rethinking as the evidence comes forth of how China basically slow walked and in some cases hid information from the rest of the world. And as a result, millions of people have gotten sick and died. So from a standpoint of congressional action, which this would take, what type of reception, Congressman Green, are you getting from your colleagues on this concept?
Well, it's so far so good. We've been apart, so I haven't been able to have face-to-face meetings with folks. But as we talk by phone, the reception's very positive. And there's some other stuff. I've got another bill that I'm going to drop tomorrow. That one of the things China's doing is it's during this economic crisis, this global economic crisis, they're buying up countries. Companies. Some of those have U.S. national security interests. And so we've got to sort of confront that. And I've got some legislation coming out tomorrow on that. And I've gotten a lot of positive reception as I've talked to my colleagues about that bill, too.
Let me transition for a minute. We've got a few minutes left, and I think there's going to be a lot of discussion, as there should be, about our relationship with China, and I'm hoping this causes a total recalibration of that relationship because they are not to be trusted. We've seen that. It's abundantly clear, and we've suffered many consequences from it, health-related as well as our economy. The president now, last week, rolling out a way forward, a three-phased plan to restart the economy. People are eager. I think people are tired of some of these restrictive governments that are keeping people locked in their homes. What do you see as the best way forward here in getting our economy going again?
Well, I think very clearly we could do non-emergent medical in most places in the country right now, except for those hot spots. That would be probably step one. I know I have constituents that have had breast biopsies postponed 3 times. I mean, that's ridiculous. If you look at Tennessee, our ICU capacity is not even over half, and we've got the PPE, we've got the testing, so we should, in our state, open up non-emergent medical. That would be probably the first thing I would do, and then slowly advance the other things. I know our governor has been leaning forward in that regard, and I think April 30th we're opening back up, or May 1st we're opening back up. But it needs to be regionalized where each locality is in its curve. And clearly that 14-day advice that the president gave out is good, sound advice. So if you're decreasing for 14 days and all of that stuff that was in his plan, I think we should follow that, but it should be dependent upon the location.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that we talked about this yesterday on the program, how the president's approach to this has been, I would say, unique. It's based on federalism that the United States is built around, but it's been neglected in modern time, where he has actually allowed the local governments, the state governments, to craft their own responses to this based on federal guidance and federal resources. So it's kind of refreshing. I think they're reopening, they're pushing it as the same way, states to take their, the best approach that they feel is best for their states. Although I would provide this one caveat that I've communicated actually to the president and to his administration. There are some governors that have used this opportunity to I think, overly seize control, which is in the nature of many within the Democratic Party.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And you take some of the horrific comments from folks like AOC about hoping that the oil and gas industry never gets going again. I mean, those are just terrible things to say. We're talking about one of our best sectors of our economy that employs and feeds many families, and just that direct attack on industry. That's who they are. I mean, they didn't care about delaying the many different programs as a part of the CARES Act getting to people. There were good things in that bill. They certainly didn't care blocking refilling the PPP program. For them, it's about their special interest, and for that, they're doing that to be empowered. Period. That's who they are.
Well, there's a multitude of reasons why we need the oil and gas to come back, not only the jobs, but the president, under his policies, we've seen energy independence, which has been a national security issue. And I know as a combat veteran yourself, you understand the significance of that issue.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
All right, Congressman Mark Green, as always, thanks so much for joining us. Great to talk with you, and glad you're doing well.
Thanks, Tony. Have a great day. Be safe.
All right.